I'm going to talk about characteristics of projects. What makes projects projects and not just normal operations that repeat themselves over and over again? There are 5 characteristics that set projects apart from other types of operations, and they're listed here. Let's take them one at a time. Firstly, life cycle. Every project has a defined life cycle, meaning that they've got a defined beginning and an end. Whether that be a week, a month, a year, and there may be different milestones in the middle of the project, but overall it's a chunk of time in which defined work takes place. Next is uniqueness. Every project has some element of uniqueness. Some projects are highly unique. Take for example Elon Musk's Hyperloop or a manned mission to Mars. All of these things, they haven't been previously attempted before. There might be different elements that have been done before, but overall it's a very, very new endeavor. There are less unique projects, for instance a bridge spanning a river. Lots of bridges have been built all over the world, and there'll be different parts of building a bridge that will have been conquered before or done before. But in terms of any specific location, there might be unique elements of a project. For instance, the soil makeup, or the width of the river, or the different planning complications that a project manager might come against. But overall, all projects have some elements of uniqueness, things that haven't been done in exactly the same way as has happened before. All projects have a defined purpose, something that the project stakeholders or project manager wants to achieve, and it's defined before the project is undertaken. This defined goal will have a measurable aspect to it. It can be measured for success. Projects are made up of different stages. Stages have to be completed before other stages are undertaken. These different stages are interdependent on one another. Take, for example, the building of a dam. When a dam project is undertaken, there has to be a planning stage before ground is broken. Then it moves on to diverting the water away from the dam site. This can often involve building tunnels. Once the tunnels are in place, the river is then blocked so it diverts the water through the tunnels. When the water is diverted, the groundworks can take place, and then the construction of the dam can go through all of the many different parts required to build up the dam. Each stage can't be started until the previous stage has been finished. And in the middle of all of these different stages, there are some different tasks that can happen concurrently with one another, meaning that different jobs can be taken on simultaneously if they're not directly dependent on one another. The more complicated a project is, the more complicated these interdependencies are, and therefore it often takes network diagrams and such things to try and map out the complexity of all of the interdependencies of a project. Finally, all projects have a certain degree of conflict. The more complicated the projects are with the more stakeholders, the more conflict that will be involved. Take, for example, a new hospital. There are lots of different stakeholders involved in the building of a new hospital. First of all, there's the government. There might be a local government. There might be local politicians. Each of those politicians might have a different stake in trying to get the hospital built in their own constituency. Then there are the patients. Different patients might have different requirements in terms of where the hospital is located and also what type of services the hospital provides. Then the actual workers, nurses, doctors and administration staff, they all have different types of ideas or agendas in terms of how the hospital should be built, laid out, etc. These are just the obvious stakeholders involved in the building of a hospital. There's always much more than that. For example, planning authorities, different transport authorities, making sure that they can get transport, public transport and so on, in and out of the hospital. Different neighbours groups. There'll be an environmental impact that an environmental authority will be looking at. There might be different socio-economic factors that might be looked at in terms of different stakeholders might want the hospital built in places of high unemployment and so on. The bigger a project is, the more stakeholders involved, there will be much more conflict involved. And those are the 5 different characteristics of projects. You can contrast these types of characteristics with operations that roll over from day to day. For example, retail. You've got a shop that sells groceries That shop just continues to sell groceries ad infinitum. They don't have an end life cycle. Each day's work is not unique. It's often very similar to the days before, and will probably be very similar to the days coming afterwards as well. Or take, for example, a factory that is making toys. Again, they're making toys. They might do it consistently and don't have an end date. The toys aren't unique either. Just the same toy might be just produced over and over again. So therefore, neither of those two different types of operations are project-based. As an exercise, I challenge you to think of different examples of projects and just make sure that all of your different examples that they adhere to each of the different characteristics that we've listed here.